Hey guys, so as promised, it's been a little while, but it took me a while to fill out this questionnaire that I showed you last time to do with Gamay. So I'm going to read you through it, and in the background is going to be a picture of me drawing out a map of Gamay, and I'm going to see how quick I can do this drawing and how many questions, and then we'll move on from there. You'll see what I mean when we get to the end of the video. Okay, so let's go. The city's name is Gamay. The country/kingdom that it is in is Branwen. What defines this settlement as a city? This settlement is considered a city for several reasons. It is a large centre for trade in the continent, with many inroads and trade routes meeting where the city has settled. The city is also built on a temple that houses the portal stones and their keepers, which were originally guarded by the beautiful but dangerous forest creatures. Since the city has been built, the forest has been preserved at its centre, with the temple being made into the castle of the Starfall Council, also known as the Crystal Keep. Who lives here and what are they called? They are called the Gamay. Why do they live here? The city is a bustle and hustle of trade, politics and learning. It is a clean and civilised place compared to the rest of Branwen, with very little crime that actually affects the common people, with an abundance of food due to the plains and fields that it grows in. It is also home to the Starfall Council, being that it is around the Portal Stone Temple, which is where newcomers to the world are summoned. What do the inhabitants do? There is a mix of people here, mostly though they are traders, politicians or scholars of some description. The city is well known also for its healers and druids due to the forest at its centre. What are the city's resources? Despite the city being a source of trade, its main resource is grown fruits and cereals from the forest in its centre and the surrounding fields. There is of course powerful healers that are willing to teach their trade, though not necessarily just for those that can afford to pay in gold. What resources need to be imported? Typically, the Gamay do not have their own metalsmiths, so armour and weapons are what tend to come in the most. Fish and meat are also brought in from surrounding farms and the long-distance coast. What is the main source of income? Traders deal with magical talismans, breads, sweet treats, fruit, cereals and vegetables that are grown by the people themselves. Almost everyone in the city has learned a basic form of alchemy and has some form of residual magic in it, so there are hundreds of potion sellers of varying forms or levels. Where is the city? The city is situated on the right centre of Branwen, surrounded by farmers' fields and plains where wild herds of animals roam free. Who are its closest neighbours? Many small villages, towns and militia outposts surround the city, but the biggest other city neighbour is the Moradel city, which is on its own island to the west. Why was the city built here? The city was built where it is, mostly due to the Portal Temple that has been there since time immemorial. Thankfully, the fields around the temple have proven to be fertile, which has aided in its growth. How large is the city? The city is fairly large, with at least 50,000 people living here and many travelling traders, healers and scholars at any given time. This is for the time period that this is set. What do the dwellings look like? The dwellings of the inhabitants are all built in a similar style, be they for the rich or the poor. Mostly the buildings are made out of the quarried white rocks from the northern mountain range nearby. Typically, they are squared and designed with flourishes at the corner dependent upon the style of the occupants therein. Why do they look the way they do? The buildings of the city are white because the quarry where the rocks have come from is a mix of white stone and marble. The designs of the buildings are a mix of cultural designs, though mostly of a blocky appearance. Are there any threats to the city? There are no real threats on the continent of Branwen, as it is mostly a peaceful country, with the Starfall Council typically ensuring that there are no wars or such like. However, in the past, the elves have fought the humans and native races of Caventia, along with armies of darkness and demons. The most dangerous thing that could actually affect the city is the portal stones housed within the temple itself. The portals can be opened at will, but also open of their own accord, allowing unknown creatures into the world, though not always at the site of the city. How has the city adapted to this threat? The city has an outer wall 20 foot tall that is 10 foot thick, made out of white rock. Inside each district is set up to allow them to be cut off from the others and survive on its own in a siege situation. At the portal temple itself, there is a guard on duty at all times. A small army in its own right, the portal guard answer only to the head of the Starfall Council and no one else. Their task is to defend the temple from the outside and the inside. The city is also home to the Knights of the Silver Rose, paladins of renown that guard the ruler of Gamay, King Ammon Bracarius, as well as the Starfall Council itself. What is the prevalent architectural style? Most buildings in the city are of human build with some elements of other cultures within. Mostly these extra design pieces are based from the occupants' cultures, such as elvish homes having leaves carved into the walls, etc. Who are the city's leaders? The king of the city and most of the humans on Branwen is King Ammon Bracarius. Legend tells of him leading the humans from the coast with the aid of the Moradel Lady and protecting them from the onslaught of the elves. This was 500 years ago and he is still alive. Some think it is a blessing from the gods who live in this land for saving the native races. Others speak in hushed tones of blood magics. Who are the outsiders? Typically, at any one given time, there are so many outsiders and travellers in the city that there is typically no one considered an actual outsider. Elves may find themselves viewed with veiled disdain, but it's nothing more than an ancient enmity that is slowly dying down. Where do they live? Most travellers are housed in the centre of the city nearby the temples and markets that have grown up around the crystal spire of the Starfall Council. Is there crime? There is very little petty crime in Gamay. Unlike most cities, criminals are treated with respect. If you steal because you are hungry, you'll be given food and some labour to pay for it. The city typically prefers to help people get out of crime than punish it. Of course, murder or crimes of a much larger nature are treated with severity and are mostly met with a swift death after the appropriate trials and rituals to ensure guilt. What do criminals want? If there is any crime, it is often of a more political nature. Bribes to get the Starfall Council to listen to them, desperate grabs for power, favourites being played, but nothing that could ultimately affect the current way of living within the city unless extremes are encountered. Is there a large rich-poor gap? There is a large rich-poor gap. However, most of the inhabitants of Gamay are at least middle class. No one is considered poor by any means. Everyone has a house and a job. Those who do not have a job or fall upon hard times can find work with the scholars at the temple. They give good pay for a day's work and often have rotating staff. How are the thoroughfares arranged? The city is arranged around the forest with 8 spokes like a wheel spreading out from it. These are connected by tiny branching streets in between each spoke. Where do the inhabitants work? There are many places of work in the city of Gamay. The temple requires cleaners, librarians, rubbish collectors, and many other menial jobs, as well as training to become a healer, apothecary, or etc. The forest has priests and their acolytes, plus the helpers as well. The Crystal Tower has its servants, scholars, and diplomats, and they too have their own entourages. The lower levels have guards, militia, traders, artisans, farmers, and all sorts of other things. Overall, the city is somewhere where you can find work. What are the modes of transport? Most transport throughout the city is by foot, with horses and carts only really being able to get through the main spokes of the city. There are magical means of transportation as well if you have the gold or the knowledge to use them. How has transportation shaped the city? Around the temple and forest at its centre, where the spokes of the roads meet, there is a large market area. The interconnecting roads between them have created smaller such areas where bars and the like have sprung up to support tired travellers. Is it easy to leave or re-enter the city? Where each spoke of the road dissects the protective wall, there is a large gate, which is guarded both day and night. During times of peace, it is essentially easy to come and go as long as you submit to random searches. If there is war or such on the horizon, then things get a little bit harder. Are there any foreigners? There are no foreigners of any other continent in Gamay, simply because contact has not yet been made with them. How are religions and rites accommodated? Close to the original temple and forest surrounding the Crystal Spire has grown the temple district. The market circle, where religious ceremonies can also be held on holy days, surrounds this. If you are a follower of Hern or other nature gods, you may also be allowed into the forest to worship. Small shrines are dotted throughout the city, some to the main gods and others to small gods and goddesses. What are the main districts? The Temple District is the centermost circle of the city. The Circle of Whispers is the political district that is as near to the Crystal Tower as it can be without stepping on the toes of the religious. This is also the home to the richest of the city's inhabitants. The third circle is the Traders' Sphere, where the shops and smaller markets take place. The final circle is the living area for most of the city's occupants. There is a small outer ring that is a buffer zone in times of war, and this is where the guards for the outer walls have their barracks and are trained. What other factors have affected the city's development? Originally, Gamay was a small refugee camp for the humans that came from their home world. After joining forces with the Moradel to fight the elves, they gained the protection of these elder beings. With their aid and the aid of the dwarves in the north, they slowly built up the city and have kept strong relations with both races and their main cities ever since. What are its landmarks? The forest, Old Temple and Crystal Spire are its most known landmarks. There are some beautiful fountains and statues, especially in the libraries and temples. What is the air like? Clear and pure. Beautiful and unsullied due to the god's protection of this city and the land. Does the city create its own microclimate? No. How is the city regarded by its inhabitants? The inhabitants of the city regard it as beautiful and loved, filled with light, laughter and joviality. There is no negativity to them about this city. How is the city regarded by outsiders? The richest city, full of airheads, scholars and rich arseholes. The people on the outside look at the city with jealousy and pride. It is loved by all, but equally hated for being the richest place to go, and even worse, it offers charity as if it was a right to all. People both love and hate this city. How old is the city? 500 years old. Have parts been redeveloped? Not really. This city is old by human lifespans, but not by some of their longer-lived occupants. There has been very little need for redevelopment. Has the city been planned? The city was planned and has been built up over its time. Most of the people originally came here are still alive and have been ensuring its growth to their plan. How are resources distributed? There are markets every other day to do with food, drink, fabrics and anything else you could need. The temples in the area also act as distribution hubs in times of need, as well as the hospitals that litter the temple district as well. How are dwellings laid out? Most dwellings in the city are at least 2 stories tall. The upper floor is for living and, depending on the use of the lower floors, sometimes has a kitchen. Some houses have the owner's shop on the first floor if they have not got their own separate location to sell from. What materials are used in the construction of the buildings? Buildings are typically built out of white stone, while the richer locations are built out of some form of marble or crystal. What flora or fauna live in this city? Within the forest at the centre, unicorns, nymphs and other light-hearted spirits of nature reside, as well as the standard forest animal fare. There are one or two slightly more negative spirits, but they are not as prominent. Throughout the rest of the city, typically ivy and other climbing plants adorn some of the buildings, with small parks looking the way their local community wishes them to. What is the characteristic of the citizens? Typically those who live in Gamay are good people, but they can be prideful of their city, thinking that there is nowhere better to live than within the white walls. They can be a little rude to outsiders, thinking that they are ill-educated or silly for wanting to live outside of the protection of the walls. How does the city reflect the tastes of its inhabitants? Clean, ordered streets, houses and parks. On the surface, nothing is out of order, and this is the way the people of the city wish to be seen. Is the city famous for anything? The Portal Temple, the Sacred Forest, and the Starfall Council are the most famous things. However, there is also the schools of learning here as well. What language is spoken? Human, as it is the easiest for most to learn than any other race's language. So that is the basics of the city of Gamay. Some parts of this quiz have opened up more areas that need to be investigated, such as who is King Almond Precarious, who is the Starfall Council, what is the Temple of Portals, but we'll get into those on another video. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please do like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care, have fun and goodbye.